Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and can I first of all take the opportunity to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a nice break over the Christmas holidays and spent some time with friends, family, got a wee bit of rest, recuperation. Yes, and I know there's a few people that have been suffering. I hope my voice will hold out today, but I apologise if I have to cough and splutter through this morning's meeting. And I have no intentions of smitting anybody, but I'll apologise in advance. Do we have any apologies this morning?
No, there are no apologies.
No apologies. Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest in relation to any of the items on the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 12, I think, the 35-37 hours.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my wife is one of the people affected.
Yeah, thank you.
Convener, I don't have a particular interest, but what I wanted to say was that I wanted to wish the Chief Executive all the best in her impending retirement.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Gordon. I think we need to remember that Mary has no intentions of going right at this moment. So I don't think we want to be making her feel that today's our last day, that there will be opportunities in due course at an appropriate time. Okay, we have the minute of the executive held on 28th of November, pages 3 to 30, and we approve that as a true record.
Convener, might I say...
Sorry?
Could I just make a comment in relation to
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Members may recall there was some discussion at last meeting on the report about the first 100 days about the opening of the Dorritor Bridge. Following on from the meeting, I've had an opportunity to look again at my services' input to the report and the actual circumstances of the opening of the bridge. First of all, the use of the words "opened the Dorritor Bridge" was inaccurate, as what was being referred to was the ceremony opening the seated area to commemorate the original bridge. I should make it clear that the wording was provided by officers for this section of the report. On reviewing my own answer to the question on the opening of the bridge, I can see this did not help to clarify the situation. I'm happy to clarify now that the Dorritor Bridge opened in 2015, and it was the ceremony for the opening of the seated area at the bridge that took place in October 2017. I'd like to offer my apologies to members, and particularly to Councillor Goldie, for the confusion that caused.
Okay, I'm happy to accept that as an amendment.
Convener,
to the minute.
I'm just wondering, I'm happy to accept the apology, but I'm just wondering, as it was your report, if you would like to make some comments in relation to the apology we've just received.
The only comment I would say, I would thank Mrs Greisler for clarifying that particular item. Had we expected that the level of detail that would be required by members, then a very different report would have been produced. It was only to detail the works that had been carried out. So other than actually thanking Mrs Greisler, I have no particular further comments to make.
I wonder if you allow me a comment on page 9, item Exec 6.5, and the fifth bullet point. I understand that this is really strictly for the approval of the minute, whether the minute's accurate. I accept that. But as I was coming in today, I stopped at the Carlin, went into the paper shop, and a woman asked me, how do I get to a housing officer? So I wonder if Councillor Hughes could tell me how the people in Carlin get to a housing officer.
It's not an item that's on the agenda. I would suggest you perhaps maybe want to take that up with officers out with the meeting.
Just a second, Convener. It's saying negotiations were progressing to terminate the lease of the Carlin one-stop shop. As I say, I accept at the minute is for approval whether it's an accurate minute or not. But I'm simply asking, surely to goodness, the Convener can tell us how a person for Carlin would go and get in touch with a housing officer today. If they want to see a housing officer today, how do they see them? Where do they see them?
Mr Ritchie, would you like to clarify? It's a service-related matter rather than a policy matter.
Thanks, Convener. The housing staff are operating as normal. Arrangements can be made for appointments, for home visits. Arrangements can be made for appointments at Calendar Square. Arrangements can be made for payments to be made at various local shops which accept PayPal payments. So we undertook just before Christmas a survey with customers in the Cameron One Stop Shop about their preferred options for an outreach facility, and that's something we'll be looking to put in place in a few weeks' time.
I really appreciate this, and I'm not going to labour it. I'm not talking about finance. This lady needed to see a housing officer this morning. Previously, for the last, well, certainly since 1980, since I came here, you could go in and see a housing officer. That lady can't go to the Falkirk One Stop Shop and see an officer, because that's not what it's there for. She can't. Well, I've spoken to the Falkirk One Stop Shop, and they say that they're not there to take complaints for other areas.
In that case, that is not my understanding.
Right, okay,
And I do believe that if the lady was to phone the council housing department, she would be able to make arrangements to have someone either speak to her directly or arrange to visit her.
I'll leave it at that, but can I just finally say, Convener, we can make arrangements to see everybody, but the people can't get to a housing officer. They can't walk into a place and see a housing officer. That's all I'm asking. But I'll get in touch with Councillor Hughes, and no doubt he'll have all the answers.
I would suggest you might want to actually get in touch with the director on that one, because it's certainly not my understanding that if you go into Calendar Square and ask to see a housing officer, you should be able to see a housing officer.
So anybody for Falkirk, finally, on that comment, that's honestly, it's finally. So anybody for a council area, council tenant, can walk into the Falkirk One Stop Shop and say they want to see a housing officer.
That's my understanding. Mr. Ritchie.
Right, okay, fine, fine.
Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been that particular option there for you, but the majority of the tenants use the telephone, and because it's also appreciated that most of the time the neighbourhood officers spend is actually on the streets and in the houses of the tenants, so they're not available at the one-stop shop, other than I understand between 9 and 10 and between 4 and 5, and even then it's dependent on workload and other commitments.
So you can't do it's dependent on.
Perhaps Mr.
There's
Ritchie.
always been, including when you were in administration.
Perhaps Mr. Ritchie, you could have that clarified, particularly to the local members affected by the Camlin area. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4, the rolling action log.
There appears to be a number of items within the rolling action log this time which have been, past the date at which they were programmed to be completed. First of all, item 224, the Community Empowerment Act question. It does first of all say that the report from the Community Planning Executive Group by 14th December, and this is January, and I just wonder if, and indeed the note at the side talks about a meeting to be held before the end of September. Could we get an update, please, on that one?
Yes, my understanding is that the plan did in fact go to the Community Planning Executive Group. That's the Community Planning Executive Group, not this executive.
Okay.
Can you double check that out with the meeting?
Should that not therefore merit a follow-up in the rolling action?
It may do, but I haven't discovered yet exactly what was done with that. So it may be that there will be a further report back to this committee in due course.
Okay.
I do believe the meeting of the Community Planning Executive was just in December, just prior to the Christmas break. Councillor Patrick, any others?
I thought there was one. If you just give me a second to move my magic machine down, I'll tell you. Sorry about this, but it's wonders of being paperless. If you just give me a second. Yes, it was item 288 I was going to refer to, talking on the housing and support care leavers matter, when it says again in the side notes that follow-up will take place in September 2017. While there may well be good reasons for that not having been concluded at that stage, it looks as if the rolling action log itself is not particularly accurate or helpful.
matters have been reported back to the Champions Board, certainly, and the matter is still under consideration. As I understand it, the report is almost complete.
I think it infers, in fact, in the Ruling Action log that the Champions Board itself is still not reached, is still being formed, is not it?
It has met once. Maybe Sarah, you could give us an update.
Yes, convener. Apologies for the delay. The Ruling Action log needs to be updated to an agreement that we will report back in March to the executive. You're absolutely right. The Champions Board has just been established, and it's really important that we make sure that they're involved in the development of the protocol. There's been a lot of considerable work undertaken by Housing and Social Work to progress the protocols in a good position.
Thank you for that as well.
I think that in the comments section, the last paragraph, the protocol we submitted to the Champions Board early in 2018, I actually think that should have been in the comments too, to actually reflect exactly where it is. And I think that's just a location error. Councillor Nimmo?
Thanks, Convener. Can we possibly get an update on, there's a couple of items here, 234 and 319. 319 is the Torwood School site. Just wondering if there's any update on that, what's likely to happen with the site. And 234 is to do with the traffic management for marches and processions. I believe COSLA have discussed this. Can we get an update?
And certainly the COSLA are in discussions in relation to that. There was a working group set up, but I don't think they've met as yet.
Do you have a timeline or anything at all?
I don't have a timeline. I'm not a member of that particular work stream.
I know that matters are under discussion and will be coming back to COSLA as quickly as possible, but the issue is one between COSLA and Peace Scotland.
Right.
COSLA acting on behalf of individual local authorities.
Okay.
And in relation to the Torwood site, I think there's a paper due to come probably first next executive.
My expectation is that we will be able to bring matters back to members at the February executive, but that's subject to a number of further considerations around these options that are described there, but that's our target date is February.
Okay, thanks for that.
Convener, just again, page 19. Item 358, to receive a report on the specific locations of the West and Central Hubs, Director of Corporate Housing Service in progress, no date, no nothing. Can we get a date for that?
That will be coming through a strategic property review, and the working group will be updated on that.
So what will the date be?
At this moment in time, I don't think we have a date for the update, but I know there's work ongoing. Looking at the options for the Falkirk West Hub and Central. Are you able to?
Yes, obviously the last time we reported to members on the SPR, we were in a position to further clarify the position in relation to the West Hub. The Central Hub, there are a number of options for location which are currently being considered. Again, the working group will be scheduled to meet shortly, as the convener says. And that one of the things that it will be considering is progressing the location for the Central Hub.
Okay.
Okay, if there is no other questions in relation to the Ruling Action log, move on to agenda item 5, parking enforcement.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this report provides an update on the work that we're doing in respect of the decriminalised parking enforcement project and seeks authority from members to initiate the formal process with Scottish ministers. Members will recall that the initial report in relation to this was in September 2016 when the business case for supporting the DPE project was presented to members and a particular business model adopted at that point. Decriminalisation will be effected by a designation order which would be made by Scottish ministers, but before this can be approved we must be able to demonstrate that we are in a position to operate the regime and make the appropriate application following the necessary consultation. In relation to the application, the Transport Scotland advise it's always best to provide them with a draft of the application so that they can comment on this. They act on behalf of the Scottish ministers in this matter, and the draft was duly forwarded to them in June of last year. They responded with comments towards the end of last year, and these comments have now been incorporated into our current draft application. I think it's important to note that if members agree to authorise the application being submitted today, then should it be approved by ministers, then we will be committing ourselves to undertake this work. As we note at paragraph 4.3, this process can take approximately 9 months, and so we're identifying that the decriminalised parking enforcement could be in place in October of this year. One of the key elements of our application is to be able to demonstrate that there's been extensive consultation with stakeholders in respect of the change. And as we say at paragraph 4.4, we consulted with over 220 stakeholders and had 5 responses with no adverse comments. I think this really reflects the general recognition that the arrangements that are in place currently are not effective, and that there is really a need for change and a desire for change among stakeholders. Prior to any approval of our report, of our application, we require to make sure that our lines and signs are all in order, and paragraph 4.5 describes the process that we've undertaken to do that. There's a contract that's been completed, one which is due to be completed next month, and one which will be starting shortly. The paragraph 4.6 identifies the processes that we will be pursuing in respect of issuing and processing penalty charge notices. We obviously currently administer the off-street parking arrangements for the council, and accordingly we are going to integrate the processes that we have with the on-street parking arrangements, and that's part of our business case. Key to the success of the new regime will be the publicity. We have planned a comprehensive publicity programme. We are required to publish a notice in the local newspaper, but we're very much aware that communications via social media and IT-based methodologies are ways to make sure that we reach as many of our residents and visitors as possible. And the last part, paragraph 4.7, identifies the charges that will be made. The implications are contained in the report as normal. There's a reference to the business case which I've referred to earlier, and the recommendations convener contained in paragraph 2, and that's to note the progress made as I've described, but also to instruct officers to submit the formal application now to Scottish ministers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rona. I think vast majority of members would welcome this moving forward. I know that as I am regularly contacted with regard to issues around parking in Falkirk Town Centre, and we regularly raise this with the police, but obviously they have split resources, and obviously sometimes the major incidents means that parking is not an issue, but it is an issue to some of our residents, particularly our disabled residents who have mobility difficulties and can't get parked. So I'm pleased that we're able to take this forward a stage, and we'd happily move the recommendations as in section 2 in relation to the report.
Happy to sign that.
We're happy to support the report, given that it was our report back in the last administration coming forward. Our concern with it is that whilst it is true that there are massive problems in town centres, there are other problems in the rural areas where people have got great difficulties with parking. My colleague, Councillor McCluckie, always goes on about the parking up in his area. And what our concern is that whilst it's fine, and we will do this, and no doubt, but the majority of the time spent here trying to resolve this problem will be spent in town centres. So we need to get an assurance for yourself and from the Director that outlying areas, the rural areas, will receive the same treatment.
I think as and when the process goes forward, Mrs Geisler will bring forward a scheme that will incorporate all of that members will be able to approve.
So you would agree that it should do that? Should accommodate all areas?
Absolutely, absolutely, no doubt.
No question.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just wondering how many parking attendants do we actually have, because the report doesn't detail that.
The detail around the parking attendants that we currently have and those that will be required was contained in the business case in the previous report. From memory, and I would need to check this for you, I think we currently have 4, and we would require to recruit another 2, but I'll check that for you just in case those numbers aren't actually accurate.
And you think 6 will be sufficient to cover the whole Falkirk area?
In terms of the business case that we've worked on, yes, that would be the case. But it is a business case. We would need to see, once the scheme was in place, how it was operating and whether or not we would require to deploy additional resources. Obviously, the majority of the on-street parking restrictions are in the town centre, as you would expect, but Councillor Gould is correct, of course, they do apply in outlying areas as well. So we have identified as part of the report that the core activity would remain in the town centre. However, that there would be a need to have the ability to target out areas out with the town centre as well. So our business case is framed on the basis that we would have that resource, but it would be reviewed once it was in operation. And obviously we'll be looking for feedback from our communities. As I say, we've engaged with them as part of this publicity campaign, and also from members as well, to let us know where the particular hotspots are, so that we'd be able to address that.
Okay, thanks, Convener. I think there's probably certain particular problems surrounding like the railway stations and the like that need to be taken into account in the local areas. So, okay.
I think very much like our community wardens, it will be intelligence led, and I think information needs to be fed into the system, and that's where I think local members and residents will be able to play a role in making sure that, that this is actually working to the benefits. Okay, moving on to item 6, Tourism 2020 Strategy Update.
Thank you, Convener. This is our annual report on tourism activity in our area. It seeks to update on progress and to seek authority to further progress the area tourism partnership which has been established. Tourism, as all members will know, has become a key element of our local economy, and our strategy, which was launched in 2015, recognises the need for us to build on the success that was emerging at that time. That strategy was developed following a policy development panel, and there were obviously key partners involved in that process as well. As we say at paragraph 4.1, the strategy has 3 key targets, and that relates to expenditure from visitors, overnight visitors, increasing accommodation for overnight visitors, and the establishment of the Falkirk Area Tourism Partnership that I've mentioned. As part of the review over the past year, we've identified that we need to also focus on some targeted measures relating to other issues, and they're described in paragraph 4.2. We commission an external report, as we say, on an economic model for tourism, the STEAM report, and that report's in May of each year. And in May 2017, that related to the period to 2016. And you can see at paragraph 4.3 the improvements that have been made between 2015-16, but obviously the vast improvements in the visitor activity between 2009 and 2015. There's details of the STEAM report in the appendix that's attached to the report. We've also working in partnership with Visit Scotland. We have introduced the Scottish Tourism Industry Barometer, which is a data collecting initiative which allows us to have up-to-date information in relation to our own particular circumstances. I think the results to date, we say in the report, have been very positive. There's a strong degree of optimism amongst local tourist businesses for the future, and there's a recognition that emerging opportunities that we have in our area and the need to provide bespoke offerings to respond to those opportunities. Paragraph 4.7 gives details of the Visit Scotland Growth Fund successful bid that we made, and how that money has been spent. There are a number of YouTube opportunities that you can go and visit to see how the video itineraries have been created. They're really very impressive, and I would encourage you to look at these. And as I say, there's more detail about the publicity campaign and the marketing campaign in the appendix to the report. Finally, the tourism partnership that I've referred to before, this is currently an informal body. It's been received very positively amongst tourist businesses in the area. Visit Scotland are involved, the bid companies involved, the Trust, Scottish Canals, etc. are also partners in this. And there was a recent event, I think it was in October last year, which was very well attended and very, very positive feedback. In January of last year, the executive agreed that we move this onto a more formal platform, and we're now in a position to do that with the partnership agreeing to progress in this way by establishing a company limited by guarantee. The paragraph 411 describes how the council would continue to remain engaged with the organisation, but as an external as an independent group, it has opportunities to secure external funding that the council wouldn't have, and there are also other advantages of being an industry-led body that members will be aware of. The implications are contained in section 6 of the report, with recommendations in paragraph 2, and that's to note the activity as reported as contained in the report, and to move the partnership onto a more formal basis.
Thank you, Mrs Geisler. I think we have to recognise an opportunity. Falkirk has become a tourism town. We have some great assets, and we now need to make the most of those by encouraging people to come, developing it further so that they come and stay and do a wee bit more. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as in section 2. Councillor Spears.
In saying that, there's great opportunities. There's great opportunities at present as well. I think Brexit has thrown up that many people are not going abroad on holiday, and many people are choosing to holiday locally. And with the ever volatile exchange rate, it makes good value to holiday in Falkirk. And I think I'd be amiss of me to miss this opportunity not to use all forms of media and social media. This is the time to tell your friends to come and visit Falkirk, especially if they live in America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or anywhere in the world. The exchange rate's good. Come and visit us here. We look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Any questions in relation to the report? Councillor Golding?
Well, as I say, it's the report again that we brought forward at the start when we set it up, so happy to support that. I'm going to have to keep saying that so that we don't get another repetition of the last stramash that we had, convener. But it is a good report. But at the time that this was done, we asked specifically if there would be any facilities for people coming for camping in the area and for caravan sites, because that's one aspect of the tourism that's on offer, one of the things that are missing. I wonder if there's any way for forward in that.
Mrs Geisler?
Yes, there has been. There's it's not really camping, I suppose, but Kersbrook cabins are opening in the spring of 2018, and we have the very interesting sounding Heart of Scotland glamping. They've received planning permission for their project, but they're still awaiting the outcome of their leader application. So I think that we're moving along in that direction. Certainly the Scottish Canals are very keen on promoting this agenda as well. So that's all the information I have in front of me, but I can make further inquiries and provide more information for Councillor Goldie on that particular aspect of the work.
Okay. Councillor Colley?
I just also wanted to highlight the development of the touring caravan site on near the Falkirk Wheel as well.
Yes, that's the Scottish Canals.
It's been very popular from what I can see.
Yep, absolutely. There's a number of strands that have been developed and are continuing to be developed as relationships are building, particularly over the last few months. There's been significantly some movement with those particular organisations and taking things further. Okay, moving on to a similar type item, and it's agenda item 7, the anti-development of Stage 2 heritage lottery bids.
Yes, this is a report, again, a good news report. You'll remember, you'll all remember the Antonine Ball getting its World Heritage status, and the action plan for developing opportunities associated with that was agreed in March of 2015. Also, there was a Heritage Lottery Fund bid made stage 1 bid made on behalf of the partner organisations associated with the wall, which are the East and West Berkshire Councils, Glasgow City Council, North Lanarkshire Council ourselves, and Western Berkshire Council and Historic Environment Scotland. The bid was the submission was in May of 2016. Was in July 2016, and it was the project was led by Western Bartonshire Council. That stage 1 bid was approved. You'll know that this funding requires us to put an initial bid in, which, if approved, normally comes with funding to develop the stage 2 bid, and that's what's happened here in March 2017. And we were awarded £97,000 for the purposes of developing that bid, and that work's been going on since then and is now complete. The bid is for the project called Rediscovering the Antonine Wall, and the detail of the project is contained in the appendix to the report. But there are also it's a wall-wide project involving all of the partners working together very closely to be delivered over 3 years. But there are specific parts of the project, as you would expect, that are going to be in the Falkirk area, and I think that they're very key, and that's recognised in the report. One of the things I think is very interesting is that the emphasis on the community-led projects. There are 6 in this council area that will be delivered over the 3-year lifespan, and I think this is really critically important for all of these opportunities. We've seen it with the Area Tourism Partnership in the previous report. The way that the community has embraced the opportunities around the wall, I think, are very significant. The project will also include the creation of the 21st Century Legion, which is a volunteer workforce to support the delivery of the project, and reshooting of the Walk the Wall film from the 1960s. The funding package is described in paragraph 4.6. There will be a small financial contribution that will be required over the period of the project from the Council by way of match funding, and that's described in paragraph 4.7. The implications in the normal way are in the report, and the recommendations in paragraph 2 are to note the terms of the proposals in respect of the bid and to authorise submission of the stage 2 bid. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Geisler. I think this, again, is in keeping with the previous report in developing Falkirk as a tourism town, and using our assets to the best advantage in developing those. And this is another step in that process with the bid. Also demonstrates our ability and willingness to work in collaboration with other local authority areas across some of those projects, and actually be able to deliver on them. But I think this is, again, you're right, it is a good news report. I think it covers quite a significant area of Falkirk, particularly with the 6 community-based projects, and I look forward to seeing those develop over the next year and come into fruition and delivered in the 3rd year. Councillor Spears.
Much pleasure, and second the same. It was my great pleasure some 10-11 years ago to sign the document for World Heritage status for the Antonine Wall. This is a great asset we have within our district, and, as you know, across central Scotland. That's why we want to work in collaboration with the other councils that have parts of the wall within their districts. This is a great tourist advantage that we have. This is one that we should have been monopolising more, and it's one that I know with this administration, working with tourism and heritage on a marriage, that we will be trying to find a better word than punting, but punting the Antonine Wall. We will be pushing the Antonine Wall so that it's prominent and it's a feature that people will want to come and see. And with our partners, I don't know if I'll be fit enough, but I'd love to one day walk the wall.
I'd be more than happy if Councillor Spears wanted to start walking the wall any time at all. It should go the whole length of it, actually. But what I was going to suggest was, Councillor Spears, to be fair to him, as the portfolio holder, is talking to the reports that are coming forward. But instead of punting and pushing, because it's very difficult to push the Antonine Wall, he might have said promoting. The last administration, of course, on the 17th of March, St Patrick's Day, when we brought it to the executive. This was their first report. And just as an aside, Convener, it's an excellent report. We obviously, as I say, being at the start of the collaboration between the other councils on this particular project, we didn't have a problem with it at all. I just wonder about there's a forklift being built under our place, Camlin, at Tamford Hill, and the provost, or the former provost, had asked, sorry, my apologies, Pat Reid had asked that there should be a display there, a drop-in on a display on that, and was advised that there was only enough money for 2. And that would be a great disappointment if we couldn't get somebody up there to see the work that's being done, because it's a really exciting project. And the only other thing, it's just an aside that came to me there a minute ago, when we're looking for the Lost Legions on the Roman Antonine Wall, I wonder if that would equate and be similar to the Lost Legions of housing officers out in the Camlin area.
Okay, Mrs Geisler, perhaps the Our Place Camlin project and the work that's been going on there could actually be linked in some way?
I think there are links already, but you're quite right. I think we can make as much of those as possible, because that's obviously a lottery-funded project as well.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering if Mr Goldie was going to claim to be at the beginning of the process of moving the officers from Camlin Housing to the hub concept, because I believe that was one of his programmes.
19.1. Yes, there was a proposal which was agreed by all parties to move them, but we didn't expect to have nobody in the Camlin area and not being able to contact anybody in the Camlin area. And thanks for letting me know this again, Councillor Alexander. If somebody's got a problem today with a difficult neighbour or is an abused individual, male or female, they can't walk up that street and get a housing officer, and that's a concern for me.
But they can lift the telephone and speak to somebody, as vast majority of people would do.
Exactly. And the fact is, Convener, that we're being presented with an image of people, housing officers, just hanging about, waiting on someone approaching them.
19.1.
I never mentioned anyone by name.
You said you were presented with an image.
We've been presented with an image of housing officers just waiting on someone walking in off the street and to take their housing complaint. When the reality is, as we all know, housing officers spend most of their time, the vast amount of their time, out round about the houses, round about the doors. And what concerns me, Convener, is the lost legions of housing officers. Because from the review that took place under our administration from 2007, the shrinkage in the department is quite marked from the reorganisation that we presided over in 2006, which made frontline staff the very, very core of the proposals.
19.1.
This is not a subject of a debate.
No, is this
it's
who's
not
chairing the meeting
no, I'm sorry, it's not a subject of a debate. It's not up for discussion in the paper. It's not relevant to the paper that we're discussing. So I'm
relevant.
sorry, you've had...
Mr Alexander came in on it.
No, I'm sorry, there's no more. You've both had an opportunity. That's it, finished.
I can understand you being embarrassed.
I'm not embarrassed by it, Councillor Goldie. You both had your say, and I'm not having this particular agenda hijacked by a matter that is not up for debate. You have been asked to take the particular issues that you've raised up with the Director because they are inaccurate and this is not the appropriate place.
I've got to say this to you. You're now saying that what I've just stated this morning is inaccurate, and this is how I find myself difficult with you. You haven't checked that. I can bring that person to you, and then you will need to again apologise publicly.
Councillor Goldie, it is not a subject for debate here. That is a service-related matter. You take that up with the Director.
Next business.
Sorry.
I think Mr Goldie's hectoring style is such that we should move on. Move next business.
Indeed, we are moving on to the next item, item 8. I'd already indicated that. We have the projected financial position. Mr Smale.
Thank you very much, Convener. This is the final revenue projection report for the current financial year. There will be an outturn report brought to the Executive after the close of the financial year and during the audit process. The first part of the report in section 4.1 deals with the general fund, and the positions summarised in para 4.1.2, where we're projecting a position of under budget of just over 3 million. And that's a movement of just over £1 million from the position last reported in October. And that's mainly attributable to an adjustment to the housing benefit projection following the mid-year caseload review, and also additional funding from the Scottish Government relating to temporary accommodation. The overall variance, as previously reported, is primarily due to lower employee costs coming through. Para 4.1.4 works its way through each of the service areas and gives you an overview of the position. I won't go through that in detail, but perhaps worth just noting the very first service, the Council's largest service, Children's Services, and noting within that the two elements with education, which is by far the largest slice of it, under budget by some 200,000, but the social work element over budget by 1.2 million, that being primarily attributable to costs associated with providing care packages for looked after children, both away from home, in both external fostering placement and residential care. We set out in para 4.3 some statistics relating to workforce. At 4.3.2, you can see those over the past 3 years in terms of redeployment, severance, and also the headcount over the same 3 years. Turning to the HRA side of the house in para 4.4, I think the key point to note there that that's still projected to be in line with budget. We then turn to the Council's reserves in 4.5, starting with the General Fund reserve and reflecting the underspend, projected underspend I flagged earlier. The projected balance on the main General Fund at the year end is projected to be just short of 11.5 million, which is a little over the upper end of the strategic range approved by Council. 4.5.4 deals with the multiple strands within the Repairs and Renewals Fund. There's narrative for each of those set out in that paragraph, and there's a table at Appendix 3 which summarises the position. It's evident that for most of those strands, investment is taking place, and in consequence the balance of these elements within the Repairs and Renewals Fund is reducing. The next category of reserves are what we termed earmarked reserves. There's 5 of these. They're set out in para 4.5.5. The narrative shown there has remained broadly consistent throughout the course of the year in terms of the status of each of these funds. So if I can just jump back to the recommendations at the front of the report, and that's inviting Executive to note both the projected position at the year end and also the position with reserves. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Smale. I think where we are is very helpful in the budget preparations for next year's budget, along with a better settlement than we'd originally anticipated. But I do thank the services for all the hard work in getting us to where we are, and indeed working through the budget preparations as we go forward. I think that this is a juncture that we reach at this particular time of year. There's a further report, obviously, that's going to Council next week in relation to the budget, and I think it's helpful to be able to feed into that. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as in section 2.
Can I 1 second the movement of this report, and also congratulate Brian and his team for the work that they have done through the year. It's been eye-opening in the last sort of 7-8 months. Actually seeing what you people are actually doing every day. He's worked really hard to keep everything as tight as you possibly can. Congratulations for that.
Okay, mindful that there is a report going to Council next week. Is there any particular questions in relation to the report?
There's a number of points I'd like to make, Convener. I think that Mr Smale was very open and honest when he said that lower employment costs, and that there's mentioning it through virtually every aspect of this report, that there's going to have to be lower employment costs. The one that, if we go to page 49, General Fund Housing under budget. Now it's under budget and it's lower than anticipated staff costs within the welfare advice. Now, forgive me for saying that seems to be strange to me, homeless and private sector housing. So what we've got is lower than anticipated staff costs within welfare advice, homeless and private sector housing. Can Mr Smale advise me how that comes about? I mean, we think people welfare, homeless, how have we managed to achieve, or maybe Mr Ritchie could do it, how have we managed to achieve that same?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. These savings are associated with staff turnover and the period of time taken to recruit staff, between some staff leaving and new staff being recruited.
So the problem hasn't gone away. The problem's still there, but we're taking longer to employ staff. If we take longer to employ staff, and I know the condition that we have at the minute, but if we take longer to employ staff, it means that the staff that are there are getting a heavier workload. Would that be right?
I'm not saying that we're taking longer to employ staff. I think we're just reflecting the staff turnover that there's been then, and just what the recruitment period is between person A leaving and a replacement coming in.
Okay, so we're not taking any longer. Fine, and thanks for that, Mr Ritchie. Integrated Joint Board, to see it's having to save 3 million in the present state of the health service, but we can talk about that another day. It seems very difficult to understand why we should be taking another £2 million off of them, but I know where that's coming from as well. Citizens Advice Bureau, 8th of December 2017, we're going to start more work. The work will start in January 2018. That was something that we brought through. The state of the CAB office up there, I mean the physical state, the fabric of the building was a deplorable condition, and we brought that through in 2015, I think it was, to get it done, and I'm disappointed that it's no done and dusted by this time.
I don't think that's on our part. I think it's there's been delays with regard to the CAB.
Pardon?
It's not on our part. I think that the delays are with the CAB themselves.
And could I just get some clarification on that? Because I was talking to them the other day. What have they done that's not been, that's held up the job?
Is somebody in a position to update in relation to that?
I know that there is the issue over the relocation, and I know that there have been complications associated with that, but I can certainly get some information.
Complications, as I understood it at the time, and I was involved in it heavily at the time, where that the building up the stairs, Bakey's pool room as we used to call it, or billiard hall, was problems with the roof up there. But certainly I don't know that the CAB have held it up in any way. I'd be surprised at that, so I'd appreciate clarification on it.
Oh, certainly the money is available from the council, the contribution that we agreed to, and there has been an agreement to help and support through any requirement for building warrant, etc. So I think the project has been delayed through a number of reasons, but I don't think it's been delayed by the council in that respect.
And I think additional work is required to be undertaken as well. So
yeah, but
we can certainly carry provide
I appreciate that. But given that it's a council building and it's the council that's fitting it out, but anyway, we'll wait and see. To be fair, that's fine. Quite happy with that. Yep.
Convener, can I ask for some explanation and expansion perhaps of the information under the heading of the social work accounting for the over budget situation? The situation in the report seems to me a bit children in residential schools, and presumably we're differentiating between that and residential care itself. The last paragraph is a bit, it puzzles me somewhat because it talks about the projected date packages are being reviewed. Could I ask what that is? Is that a situation of trying to get more places available in external facilities, or
I think
that last paragraph, the last sentence?
Sarah, would you be able to give clarification in the closer to home?
Yes, absolutely, Convener. The Social Work, Children and Families year-end budget outturn has exceeded budget for a number of years, and the main pressure areas relating to the purchase of external residential and foster care placements are the reason for that. There is a national trend in increasing numbers of children and young people who are being looked after, and Falkirk has fared well in terms of being below the national average for looked after children numbers, but we fare less well in terms of our average against national average in relation to children looked after at home. As a result of our position and changes in legislation in terms of children and young people being eligible to remain in their care placements up to the age of 21, and eligibility for aftercare, etc., led to a strategic service review being undertaken over the course of the last year. And the principal reason for the strategic service review was to look in detail at the reason for overspend and to provide a strategic way forward, whilst making sure that we were improving outcomes for Falkirk's children and young people. These are our most vulnerable children and young people we have significant responsibilities for. The development of Closer to Home is a 5-year strategy. The Closer to Home strategy is principally about improving outcomes whilst reducing costs. We've undertaken an entire review of every care package for every child and young person in Falkirk who's looked after away from home, to ensure that they are in the right care placement, that if there was an alternative, such as they could be returned safely to their families, that we would undertake to ensure that that would happen with creative and careful planning and longer term support. Throughout the course of that entire review, which was extensive, we discovered that the vast majority of Falkirk's children and young people who are placed away from home are in the right placements. Some of those children we have parental rights and responsibilities for, which means they are entirely our children. And if they're in the right placement, we have a commitment to ensure that they remain there and that they are appropriately cared for and educated there. We have made some strides in terms of reducing our reliance on residential school placements. However, that often means that the young person still requires to be accommodated in a care placement, but we're able to educate them either within our own mainstream school provision or some specialist educational unit, and that's perhaps where the confusion has led in terms of the paragraph in the way that has been described. There are very specific actions under the Closer to Home strategy. This is a transformational change programme for children and family social work. This is a whole new way of working, which our children and family social work workforce are entirely engaged with. This is about making sure that we are working closely with families to develop the assets that families have. There are not every set of circumstances where children can live safely at home, and we have clear statutory responsibilities to make sure that those children are safe and well cared for, and they must be removed from their family at that point in time. Closer to Home strategy makes sure that we look straight away at appropriate other family members that could provide that care, and it is only when that care is not safe and available within the immediate extended family situation that we'll look to children being placed elsewhere. And the focus of Closer to Home is to have less of our children and young people out of the Falkirk area, where we know that it's very difficult for them to maintain friendships and family relationships and education placements and relationships with their health practitioners. So to make sure that we are growing our foster care population, we need many more foster carers who do an incredible job, and we need more of them. So a focused recruitment strategy, a strategy that ensures that our staff know how to work closely with families to maximise those assets, and to make sure that although we now know that many of our children and young people are in the right placement and required to stay there and can stay there for longer, and that will be impacting on our budget, that where we can reduce the numbers of children and young people coming into care in the first place, that we're in a good position to do so.
I hope that was a very comprehensive answer, but thank you, Sarah. I think that was really useful.
I'd like to compliment you from giving me this very helpful expanded response, and I'm very grateful to you for that. We haven't for many years been very sympathetic with the continual strains that the social work department and the service is under, and we recognise that we will always recognise that our financial resources will be under considerable demand. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to get that background.
Okay. Councillor Nimmer, then Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Convener. I think John was actually sitting here reading my notes because I was going to ask more or less exactly the same thing. I fully appreciate it's a demand-led service and there's a high cost attached to a lot of these placements. We have done a lot of work over the last few years to try and accommodate our kids back in our own area. And I fully appreciate the work that's been done there. The overspend's worrying, especially with the budget coming up, because I know that there's the possibility of further cuts to the children's social work side of things as well. That makes it even more concerning about the impact that that's going to have on this side of the service and our vulnerable children. I think perhaps we need to put some sort of new emphasis on this again, and look at other ways of accommodating our kids within the Falkirk Council area rather than putting them out with, and hopefully prioritise things even more in that respect. Thanks, Convener.
I think the passion that you heard for this change in focus from Sarah is reflective of an awful lot of the staff within the children and families. They want to embrace a new way of working, one that is very much focused on the outcomes for young children. I think we need to be supporting them to make that transition. Certainly it's something that as an administration we are very, very focused on delivering on. Councillor Alexander?
Yes, Convener, I very much agree with the sentiments behind Councillor Nimmo's comments. That where possible we should be providing the facilities for these kids to be looked after. And not just looked after, but the education aspect as well of the package. And I'd be concerned if that wasn't being done. But I know that it is being done. I know that there has been a very, very close review of each and every one of the packages. I'm not saying that I agree 100% with the outcomes of those, but that's not unusual for a member to disagree with an officer. But I do know that a very thorough investigation has taken place. I'm glad that the NHS are back in favour, because it was only the last meeting, I think it was, that the ambulance service was being highlighted as an area of overfunding, and an area where perhaps the funding should have come to local authorities rather than ambulance service.
Not overfunding.
The thing that you find that the Scottish Ambulance Service is the top performing ambulance authority in the UK.
Not according to the website.
You maybe need to check that from yesterday.
Yeah. Also there was a mention of the welfare fund, the welfare rights officers, and it would be amiss if we didn't actually pay tribute to those lads and lasses that occupy that particular section. You'll be aware, Convener, of the case that we're both involved in, that highlighted, I think, the difference between the Westminster approach and the Holyrood approach. An individual who was going to be left over Christmas with not a penny, no food, no money. They sat in the Hearn House waiting on some news, and it was only the intervention, the very speedy intervention of the welfare rights officers within Falkirk Council that gave that guy some money over the holiday period. He was without, through no fault of his own, and some common sense, some flexibility, and some dedication on the part of our staff was saved his particular Christmas. What he would have done, I do not know. but we certainly wouldn't have seen them starve. But they deserve the credit that they are due. And the fact that there's a Scottish Welfare Fund at all is reflective of I think the difference in attitude towards benefit entitlement that exists in Scotland compared to the DWP approach from south of the border. And the quicker the other benefits are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, the better.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. I would just like to put on record that that particular member of staff that assisted went above and beyond on that particular day, which I think was the last working day, if I remember correctly. It was a Friday before Christmas, and it was very late in the afternoon to ensure that that particular individual did not go without over that particular holiday period. So I think the tribute to our staff, and that particular individual will not be the only member of staff to have done that, but it's because they come from a very caring perspective. I think that's all credit, and I would just ask that the service take that back to the staff. Okay, item 9 is assets requirement. Stuart, you've taken.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Members are being asked to declare 2 pieces of land surplus to requirement and authorise disposal in the terms set out in the report. Both of these are disposals to private home owners. The 2 pieces of land in question, a piece of land at Rumford and a piece of land at Carnashore. Section 4 of the report provides some information in relation to both pieces of land. Maps are attached. The sums involved are nominal in nature, and the estimated receipts are set out in Section 6 of the report. In both cases, we've had consultation with relevant local members. They've raised no objections. We've also had consultation with our tenants group. We look at housing asset management, and they have raised no objections to the disposal either. The recommendations convener set out in Section 2 of the report.
Okay, thank you, Mr Ritchie. As there's been no objections from the tenant asset group or indeed the local members, I'm happy to move the recommendations as in Section 2.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any questions in relation to this? Councillor Bryce?
Convener, that's not so much a question as a direct comment, and I didn't raise an objection to the one in Carnashore, but I did note a concern that they'd actually built on the property first before asking to buy it, and I thought that was the wrong way around. I just want my concern to be noted, please.
Okay, that will be noted, and thank you. Okay, item 10 is a test for approval. Mr Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. This is a brief report which comes before the Executive on the basis of a request by Councillor Coombs to attend the forthcoming Scottish Tourism Alliance Conference. It comes to the Executive as it very slightly exceeds my authority to consider the application, and it's a matter for the Executive to consider.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alexander.
Convener, I'm happy to move that Councillor Coombs be funded to attend this conference, but on 2 conditions. The first is that we get a report back to the Council with regards to the content and outcome of the conference. I think that's only fair that we can justify the expenditure on conference fees if the member feeds back. Some have in the past. Councillor Black, I remember, did report back in detail, but most haven't, and I would move that as the first condition. The second condition is that this be the last application that be approved in the meantime for the attendance at conferences. The closing off through a moratorium on a conference attendance won't actually clear the financial deficit that the Council has. But it will send a message across to members that we're all in this together. Members will have noted that there haven't been too many applications by members of the administration to attend conferences. It's because we've been operating on an informal basis that is not the highest priority within the Council agenda. So while the savings may be nominal, the message that goes across I think is more significant. And we're in a period of austerity, and it's a period where every penny counts.
Okay.
So I'd firmly move that the last part of the motion is that there be a moratorium on attendance at conferences for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you for that.
I would like to second that.
Thank you. Certainly, I'm aware in the past, certainly Councillor Black, in reporting back, that came through the information bulletin. And I think that's probably a reasonable way of managing that reporting back. Okay.
I'd like to, the standing orders, I support the fact no going to conferences. I don't believe in going to conferences. I think I've been at one since 1980. But if people get some benefit and the council gets some benefit, normally I would be keen to see people go. But as Mr Alexander says, and I would support the position where we shouldn't be in a situation where we're going to conferences and at the same time paying people off. I just don't think that that's right. We're in a very dire financial situation, so probably nice for you to place that on record that I agree with Mr Alexander on that. I'm slightly concerned as to have a member having to make a report back, because I think she should probably make the report back to the trust. I think if she was coming back, she'd be best to make the report to the trust and then give us a copy of that report.
It could still go in the information bulletin. I don't have a particular issue in relation to that.
I think the question is who pays the piper?
Yeah, it's a request that's come to the council, therefore the council should actually be privy to the report back.
I really am quite happy with that situation, and I support what's been said, and no doubt the new provost, when in office, will have all these things referred to he or she, whoever that may be.
Okay, thank you.